Hi, my name's Andrew, and we're just so delighted today to have Raylana Anderson, founder and owner of Anderson Consulting, to share about how you can prepare for your next job opportunity.
Raylana has lots of experience in the HR realm doing consulting for local businesses. What we are looking to accomplish over the coming weeks is how do we really build a better virtual connection between career seekers who might be looking to take this opportunity, maybe recently lost a job, unfortunately, but a way to capitalize on that and really make sure that you're ready for the next move. Because we know as the economy looks to reopen and start back up, employers are going to be retooling what they're looking for in employees, because there will be a new normal. We don't know what that looks like yet, but there will be quite a different change in what employers are looking for in employees, and we're collecting information about that now. And Raylana is here to kind of provide insights into what that looks like and how you can start thinking about the skills and the talents and the experience you have to best be positioned to connect with employers. So this is the beginning of kind of a virtual series we're looking to pilot, and there will be ways to connect with Raylana and myself, Brent Baker from the Greater Peoria EDC, or Andrew, to continue the conversation and see how we can help you be best positioned to capitalize on a new opportunity as we look towards the future. So Raylana, with that, if you want to pull up your screen, we can roll through the presentation.
I am excited actually to do this. I typically work with employers, periodically with individuals looking to be employees. And this is really an opportunity now to, as it says, get ready for what may be next for you. You may be in a great job that you love. Okay, still a good idea to get your resume in good order pretty regularly. Or you may be taking this opportunity to say, you know what? I have some skills and talents that I'd like to apply elsewhere. So this is really your chance to take stock and take that first step. Putting your best foot forward, so to speak. We're going to do this, as it says here on the screen, in 3 steps: prepare, practice, and then present. You'll be ready to do that. And remember that you are in charge. You're the person who decides where you're going to go, which skills you're going to highlight, and with whom you're going to share those skills. That is, which company or companies in the future. And you're in charge of that lens, the lens that other people see you through. And you can build that lens or start building it by preparing, which is the first step. You can prepare in 2 parts. One is first focus on yourself. And I really like the idea of, as you see here on the screen, putting a giant blank piece of paper on the wall. Butcher paper works well for this because it comes in a giant roll. And literally start with nothing and brainstorm. What have you done? What have you learned? Who did you do it with? How did it work out for you? What do you remember about the many things you've done, whether they were a paid job task, whether it was a volunteer opportunity that you took hold of and led or participated in or helped push through to a final end? There are no rules here. It's brainstorming. If you have a good friend, ask them to help, of course, from a safe distance or on the phone or on a video chat. But get that paper filled up with all kinds of things that you've done. Have a little fun with it. You know, remember that time when, gosh, we were lost in the woods and you're the one that figured out how to use the compass that we had and you got us out of there. Remember that time when the team was struggling and you were the person that made sure we stayed on task. You encouraged us to take a break. You encouraged us to come back and get the job done. Remember that time when? Those are the kinds of things you want to fill that paper with. Get it filled up. Take a little break if you have to, but keep writing. When you're done, paper's full, take a little break, reward yourself, but then, and only then, start to pull things together. Find some trends or some patterns. Group things together, draw circles or tear the paper and put things in, with masking tape on the wall and group them. Have a friend help you with this, because again, we're still not evaluating. We're still not finalizing anything. And we still may brainstorm. Something that you see on that page may trigger, oh, I forgot about such and such. Or, golly, when it comes to teamwork, I know that somebody has to be in charge, but it doesn't have to be the task leader. I, for example, if this is you speaking, I'm the one that keeps everybody focused on attitude, because I know attitude is contagious. So I work hard to keep mine positive, cooperative, to build on things instead of tearing them down. Those are the kinds of things that may come up when you see something on that wall or something on that butcher paper. Again, ask a friend for help. If you find something you like, put the numbers to it. How many of something did you get done? Or how many times did you work on something? How long did it take to accomplish a particular goal? What was the dollar value, if that's appropriate? How many people were involved, if that's a piece of the puzzle? Numbers will help other people later on understand what you did and understand the significance of it. Remember those action verbs. Please, if you take nothing away from today, avoid using responsible for XYZ on your resume. Responsible for really doesn't tell the reader very much. It says maybe, okay, that was part of my job description, but it doesn't tell the reader what you did. So, for example, I led a group or a task. I achieved X or Y or Z. I completed X or Y or Z. Focus on those action verbs. If you don't remember what those are, you can probably ask a young person who's still in school taking courses what an action verb looks like. Use those all over your resume and plan to use the numbers that go with them. Okay? After you've done all of this work, this is the beginning. This is the content of the resume that you're going to put together. There are many resume services that help you focus on whether to use a chronological or a subject matter format, whether to make it 1 page or 2 pages, generally no more than that, whether to use a position statement or an objective or not. And all of those things are great information and great tools. This comes before all of that. So this is the content that you're going to build to put your resume together. The second part of that first step, prepare, is to focus on the other. Okay, we focused on you. We did a lot of work with that. Now we're going to focus on the other, the job or the role or the company that you want to be a part of. And here you've got a lot of tools to use. You, of course, have the internet. Everything is available on the internet now. But what you really want to nail down with the company or that you're looking at, why you're selecting that company. What values does that company have, or what mission does that company put out there in front of people that makes you want to be a part of it? Today, employers are learning all over the place. And in fact, today I looked and there were at least 3 free webinars for employers to talk about how to brand their values to be able to attract people when the new normal comes around. Look at those values, look at that mission, and understand why you've selected that company, what it is that really gets you excited about working for that company, and what makes you a great fit. So, for example, back to that teamwork. If teamwork, team building, cooperation is a part of the values or the mission that that company talks about, really understand how your accomplishments and achievements, the things that you've done, demonstrate that value. Be as specific as you can be in using those action verbs and using those numbers so that you can talk about what a great fit your values are to that company's values. Again, use the tools that you've got. Talk to those friends and colleagues that you've had in other jobs that say, okay, what would you say about me? What kinds of things would you observe that you remember that I've done? How would you say I've approached my work? Am I a team player? How have I shown that in the past? Again, you're using tools, getting information so that you can build your best case to say, hey, company, I am a great fit. Here are the things that I've done that match up to the values and the mission that you have out in front of people that talk about your company. There are a lot of ways to think about how to present this kind of thing. And as you're preparing, keep in mind, again, what have others told you about your work, your achievements, your contributions? What would they say today if you could speak to your colleagues, to former supervisors, to customers? What would they say about you so that you have that in your toolbox, if you will, that you can say, I have paid attention. My perception of myself includes others' perspectives, and I know what others would say. I've verified, if you will, what I think about my own tools and my own accomplishments, my own achievements. So pay attention to those others' perceptions and perspectives. Use those numbers. Think about a format, if you will, of how to think through this stuff. And it's often referred to as the STAR, S-T-A-R method: situation, task, action, result. What that means is, as an example, if we go back to that time a group got lost in the woods and I figured out how to use the compass to get us out. Trust me, that's not a personal representation of mine. I'd be counting on somebody else to figure out how to use the compass to get us out. But if that's your position, if that's one of the stories you want to tell about teamwork, the situation was several of us went on a walk in the woods. We all took a compass because we thought, it'd be the right thing to do. And suddenly we were lost. The task then is somebody has to take charge, learn how to use the compass and get us up on the right path to get out of the woods. The action, I got a hold of the compass. I figured out that needle pointed to north, and I knew that we needed to go west. Therefore, I could say, okay, west is this way. And I led the group out. So the result is, we hope, I got us out of the woods. The whole team was safe and sound, and we all had a great laugh afterwards. Situation, task, action, result. Always remember to end with the result. Did I get the work done? Was the team successful? I'll take this note, Brent. I think at the end of this, we're going to remind people that, yes, they will have the notes when this is over, and we'll send those out to folks, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So the other thing I would encourage you to think about, not only how other people have viewed your work and your accomplishments and achievements, but what's on the screen here, this last line, how you learn, and particularly today in this pandemic period, how you adapt and what that looks like. A question I often ask as an interviewer is, tell me about the last thing that you learned. Why did you learn it? How did you learn it? What did you do? What works for you to learn things? Do you read a manual? Do you watch YouTube videos? Do you do both? Do you have to try it yourself and get your hands on it? What works for you? And what happens if things don't work smoothly? How do you adapt and change? Those are important for you to know and for you to be able to talk about so that you can say, golly, not only am I a team player, but when things go wrong, I am not the person who says, gee, this was a stupid idea. I am instead the person who says, well, that didn't work. Let's try this. So some creativity maybe, some definite attitude of, hey, optimism has to rule. We're going to get through this. Those kinds of things become important. So how do you learn what works for you? And how do you adapt when things don't go smoothly? Okay, so we've talked a little bit about preparing to focus on yourself, fill that piece of butcher paper, and really have some fun with it. Then prepare by focusing on the other, on the company, the job, or the role that you want. Even if you don't know the job title, you can really narrow down the company that you want to work with and the role, the kind of work that you want to do. For example, a friend of mine is, in my opinion, a customer service genius. He could sit down in any company and meet any individual and talk about anything so that that customer knew that for those few moments, they were the most important person in the world. Doesn't matter what company, but that's the role that that person would be great in. So what is it for you? Regardless of job title, those can be any number of things, descriptive or not, useful or not, but what kind of job, what role would you like to fill in a company? Then the practice part. And you could do it in front of a selfie screen, or you could do it in front of your mirror, but practice what you've decided are the things that you want to present to put your best foot forward and make your best presentation to a potential employer. Do it out loud. You're probably going to be faced with an interview that you need to speak out loud in. Do it out loud. Practice it. Make sure that you know how to speak the things that you want said. Tell that little story about the trip through the woods if that's part of your story. But do it so that you're comfortable with what's happening and how you want the presentation to go. Make it your presentation. You're going to get asked questions. Probably somebody's going to ask you to take a quick trip through your resume, highlight the things you want to highlight. Do that. Pull out the things that you believe are the most relevant, the most important. And if you've done it out loud, you can do it again out loud and it will sound just right. Pay attention if there are bumps or gaps in your experience, or if you're trying to change the kind of job, the role that you want to fill, be prepared to talk about that. Know what story you want told. Yes, my experience traditionally has been in retail sorts of environments. That's been great for me to learn customer service. It's been great for me to learn to think on my feet. It's been really helpful for me to be flexible with scheduling and that sort of thing. Now I'm ready to take that experience and those skills that I've learned into your company, into this kind of role where these kind of skills can be important, but isn't the sole focus of the job. So bumps or gaps, be prepared to talk about them. Talk about the story you want told to get through those bumps or gaps. I took a 6-month hiatus. And you know what? I spent that time figuring out that I wanted to learn a new skill. So I went back to school, or I took some online courses, and I filled my time learning. In fact, that's a good thing to be doing now if you're actually not working. If you're trying to fill your days, there are so many tools available to us now. The library's closed, but everything is online, and you can find all kinds of classes or skill building exercises to do. Don't forget to ask some questions. Be prepared to ask the interviewer some questions. So, for example, you might say to the interviewer when they say, gosh, do you have any questions? You'll say yes. In fact, what's the one thing that's key to XYZ, to your company's success, that maybe somebody from the outside wouldn't already know? How does this role help fill those things, help meet those success factors? You might ask, what are some of the key accomplishments that would be important for me in this role in the first 6 months? And then, of course, you'll be prepared to say exactly how your experience and skill set fits. You could ask, who are the heroes at your company? What characteristics do those people have that help them stand out? And you would be able to talk about how your experience and your values fit that. You could ask similarly, what are the characteristics, common to folks who seemed like they were going to be a great hire for your company, but who flamed out and were not successful? And you could be prepared to talk about how you're not going to be one of those folks who flamed out. So think about some questions, not just about the stuff that you found in the information that you looked at about the company, but the kinds of things that really help you stand out as a person who's ready to make a difference and ready to make a contribution. Don't make your prepared questions only the classics. You know, tell me about the company, who the founder was, et cetera, stuff I can see on the internet. And I apologize, but I want to back up here to your desired presentation. One of the things that I would suggest you want to be prepared for, particularly as the new normal comes and companies start getting really, really focused in on who they want to hire and what kinds of people they want to bring into their organization, you might well be asked about your most recent jobs. Very specifically, why were you hired? And how did that work out? Did you fill the expectation? That's a fairly broad question, but I think it's going to be important to be able to say, yeah, I was hired to do XYZ. I got it done. Or I got a good start. Something went wrong. I changed gears. We got it done eventually. We just had to take a little bit different route. So again, be prepared to answer some tough questions. Companies are going to come through this pandemic period ready to hire, but they're going to be ready to hire really focused on their mission and on their values. And you need to be prepared to jump into that, which is when you're presenting. This is the person, obviously, who's done a good job on a video interview. Probably need to be ready to do that. Practice with a friend. Video is not as scary as it used to be. It's a whole lot quicker, I think, and it's a whole lot more personal than it could be. You can actually do a real-time interview. It doesn't have to be a gap in your connection. Find a friend, practice. So be ready. You've done your practice. You've spoken out loud through your resume. You've spoken out loud through the stories you want the individual who's interviewing you to hear. Be ready to listen. Answer the questions that you get asked. If it isn't one of the questions that you've prepared for, stop for a moment. Think about your response, but do respond to the question that is asked. Listen to the question. If you are given the opportunity to say, for example, at the end of an interview, I like to ask, what have I not asked that you'd like me to know about you and your experience? Boy, jump right into that. Make the points that you've decided are the key points you want to make for that role or for that company. So listen to the questions that you get asked, respond to those, and be prepared to make your points if those questions don't get asked. So at the end of the interview, you might need to say, gosh, before we end our conversation, Mr. Interviewer or Ms. Interviewer, I'd like to share, make your points. Or one thing that didn't come up during our great conversation here today is, and fill in the blank with what you want the interviewer to know. Maybe you had a chance to talk about something you wanted to talk about. You don't feel like you made it just right. You could say, I'd like to briefly go back to whatever that point was so that I could be a little more clear about what I wanted to say. And then do that. Interviewers will remember that you made the point to make your point. That is, that you took the time to say, I'd like to be clear about what I wanted to communicate. One of the things that you might, for example, folks who are now in the unemployment arena, I heard today 1 out of 5 folks who have been employed is now unemployed. That is a horribly frightening proposition. So lots of folks getting back into the workforce. excuse me, when the new normal, if you will, comes around. One of the things you might really have a chance to stand up and talk about, or sit down and talk about on a screen, you might say, for example, to the interviewer, every now and then things go wrong, even in the best run companies. I'd like to share with you a time when things were really in turmoil and I came through. Those are the kinds of things that you can think about so that when the new normal comes around, you've got a chance to make your point and you've really got something to say to that interviewer that makes a difference. At the end of the interview, too, when you're not only asking your questions, I think it's always a good idea to come up with a summary statement. Something like, gosh, if I joined your team, which I'd really like to do, in 6 months, tell me what it is you'd like to see done that would make me a success. Wow, that's something for the interviewer to kind of chew on and think about. But they know now, not just, yes, you're glad to have the interview, but you're ready to help them be successful. And they'll tell you what that is. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here, Brent. And I think we're still on track to ask some questions.
Yeah, thank you for running through that. So I don't see any pressing questions in the chat box, but if anybody has any thoughts or direct questions for Raylana, if it can be specific about your case or general questions about insights into what employers are looking for, your past experience, any insights that Raylana might have around how things will change, and maybe wearing her employer hat, if that's appropriate, to maybe give some looking forward as to if you were hiring Raylana, right? And if you're having conversations with employers, and maybe this is a good opening question for me, is because my general interest too is in your conversation with employers, what does the landscape look like, or in your experience, how has it changed in the last 2 months than what employers' expectations have been in the past? So how have those shifted, and what skill sets maybe they're looking for now as opposed to what they were looking for historically?
Wow, big question. So I think, yeah, in the last couple of months, as we all know, if you're an essential business, you are hoping that you are managing your workforce so that you're retaining your best people and they're still ready to work with you. Employers are doing that through not just, we used to have once a year surveys, and then we had quarterly pulse updates, but regular daily communication with their folks both ways. What do you need from me as the employer, and what do you need to know from me as the employee? So it's a real emphasis on two-way communication to retain the best employees. I also know that whether you're an essential employer or one of those who's still fighting to get reopened, there is a big refocus, if you will, on best employees. Those individuals who genuinely every day come in and make the best of my company, the role that they're in, to make a contribution. There will be, I think, little room, or much less room, for naysayers, for people who are just barely skating by. I think that the job market will be such that employers will be focused, laser focused on who are the best employees to help me build and maintain the culture that I want my company to have. Employers are focused again on their mission and on their values, and the mantra, if you will, that 80% of job failure is because individuals didn't meet the culture and values, is going to be really critical. So it's a good opportunity from an employee side for this group to say, I can learn skills. Here's how I do it. And here's what I've done in the past to learn skills. I fit your organization because my values fit yours, and I can help you build your culture and maintain your focus on your mission. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And Does anybody else have any other questions? Because I do have one follow-up question to that as well. It kind of pulls on that same thread of communication. But if there's anybody else, please don't hesitate to ask a question.
I have a question, but I don't know if the same question that you are asking, Brent. Do you want to share your question first and see if it's the same question?
Sure. So I think my question was on the so that's the employer expectation, right? Of really making sure that I'm selecting folks and retaining folks that are kind of the goodness of fit, right? But I think understanding that maybe maybe scrutiny is too strong of a word, but the expectations will be much higher in the coming months for everybody. How does an employee or somebody who maybe is new to the organization, who is good, right, and is showing up and wants to be there and make it work, but we're going to be so inundated with so many other things and concerns. So if they're struggling, how do I frame my communication as an employee to my employer to say, I really want to do this, but I'm struggling. So what's the employee part of that two-way communication look like? Is there a really good framework like the STAR method for how employees can frame their communication back to an employer to say, I really like this, but I'm struggling, and here's what I would need to make this work for me. I really want to be here, but here's where I'm struggling. How can I solve this?
I think you just did it, Brent. I honestly believe that individuals, whether we represent a company or we're representing ourselves or anything in between, have a lot of grace, if you will, to simply say exactly what you just represented. I want to be here. I want to be successful. I know that these are the things I need to do. I need your help to get there. There are very few supervisors or managers who will say, phooey on you if you can't do it without help. You know, who needs you? Mostly the supervisor will stop and say, wow, really good question. Let's figure it out. The other thing I would add is some ideas. We've probably all heard the adage, nobody wants to hear problems, they want to hear solutions. So in your conversation with your supervisor or manager to say, hey, I want to be here, I'm ready to do this, and I'm a little confused. Here's what I think is the next step. Are we on the right track? Am I on the right track? So offer that next step. I think that we're going to hear a lot more about the next first step, and then probably a change in direction. So the next first step goes the other way. But I think that's an important piece of it too, Brent. So absolutely step up and say, hey, I want to be here. I'm ready to succeed. And I'm a little confused. I'm ready to do X. Am I on the right track?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from Katrina. She says, I am more of a creative type. So over the years, I would find it difficult to transfer piano skills to a desk job. To say I was both confused and impatient about researching for jobs or taking time to list all my skills, whether they paid or not is quite an understatement. So is it really worth listing unpaid as well as paid skills regardless of field?
Okay, if the question is to that butcher paper exercise, yes, put it on the wall. Because then once that is done, you'll start evaluating and you'll start deciding this stays, this goes, that stays, that goes. So yes, I think one of the things it will do, particularly for creative type, and I smile because, yeah, I'm one of those. One of the things it will do for you as a creative type is help trigger all of that stuff and then help you decide, okay, yeah, that actually works because it goes with that. And if I've got one thing sort of left hanging, that one doesn't fit. It doesn't go. But it really is an exercise both in creativity and then in evaluating to say, okay, yeah, how can I make these things work together? So I do think it's worth the initial effort.
And to be able, if I may add to that, Raylana, I mean, piano skills is really a group of significant skills.
Yeah.
Right? So, the idea of expanding that and saying, okay, well, let's like extract it out some more granularly, the ability to concentrate on sheet music, to translate sheet music into rhythm. What does that mean? From the ability to be consistent over a period of time, right? So that we're then extracting the skills of being the ability to play the piano into more base level skills that are then transferable to a lot of other work.
Yeah,
right?
determination. Yes. Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. Maybe can you talk a little bit more about transferable skill sets?
Yeah, there are volumes written about transferable skill sets. I think the key is, Andrew, as you just mentioned, to, again, throw everything on the wall or wherever your butcher paper happens to be, and then start evaluating, because that evaluation will help you figure out that transference. The piano playing is a great example. Piano playing isn't just about, I can play the piano. It's about, I had the determination and drive to practice long enough to make it work and to make it sound good. Piano playing is also all over eye-hand coordination. So eye-hand coordination is, maybe it's keyboard skills, maybe it's being able to do work on a computer, that isn't a keyboard, but it's the touch screen. So all of those things start to come through only after it's all out there. Yeah.
So I have another question following up on Brent's question with regards to, the whole idea of culture and fit. How do you demonstrate to an interviewer that you are aligned with their culture and fit? Or move that back a little bit more. How do you even understand from researching a company's website what is their culture and fit? Because a lot of times people talk about culture as a piece of paper, right? And we know that. But then the real experience is completely something else, right? Culture is lived, not written.
Right. Culture is what we do every day in every conversation, in every interaction. And companies are all over the spectrum on how well that happens in their organizations. So as an employee, first of all, as a person looking to work for a company, I'd look at what's available. There's probably a mission statement. Likely there are also 4 to 6 values that are either specifically stated in their literature or that can be inferred from the mission. And I'd grab a hold of those. If the value, for example, is teamwork and cooperation, I talked about that. If the value is individuality, if the value is creativity or innovation, I would pull that out and talk again, practice speaking to my skills and experience to say, one of the things I read in your literature is your mission of X. From that, it's easy to see that one of the values that might drive your organization is Y, and here's how I've done things that work for that, toward that value. Companies are going to be hearing a lot about culture alignment. And so they're going to be really focused in their hiring on, okay, really have I got 4 to 6 values that drive the organization? And how am I going to find people that fit that? And I think if we as individuals can help them, hey, this is the values that can be easily inferred from your mission. Here are some things that I've seen employees that work for you talk about. This is how my experience and skills fit that.
Great. And so I want to get into shifting gears. I want to get into something more practical. We're all nervous when interviewing with somebody for the first time or speaking to somebody for the first time. The first question is, how do you break the ice, right? Is it whose responsibility? I don't know if that's the right word, but how do you break the ice? I guess that's one question. And then how do you deal with the next question, which is trick questions? Like, tell me about your greatest weakness. How do you deal with those things?
Breaking the ice should be easy. It should be the interviewer who sets that stage and gets things rolling. And not every interviewer is particularly skilled at that. So yeah, good idea to be able to say, Gosh, Andrew, it's great to meet you on screen here today. I'm a little nervous as the interviewee, so forgive me if I make a couple of, misstatements or mistakes, let's move on. But be ready to say that. I think if we can be genuine and the interviewer is a little nervous, and we know they will be, but I've practiced with a friend, I've gotten on Zoom or Skype or something, and I'm used to this, and I can say, hey, I'm a little nervous. So I'm looking forward to the interview. Forgive me if I get a little tongue-tied. So break that ice. And then I'm sorry, you had another question that I really wanted to talk about.
Yes, the other question was about behavioral questions or trick questions.
Yeah.
About tell me your greatest weakness.
And there are probably volumes written on that too. But again, when I talk about being prepared to talk about the bumps and the gaps and practicing what you want to say, you can turn those trick questions to your favor. For example, what's your greatest weakness? You can say something like, I start my day with more of the things to do than I think I'm going to get done. So I guess my weakness is I overachieve. Yeah, okay, sounds pretty good. But I think if you practice, you can be ready to get through those kinds of things. And it is always okay to stop and pause and to say, let me think about that, and then do it. Take a few seconds of silence. The fact that we're on video makes all of us want to keep talking. And we wouldn't do that in normal conversation. There would be periods of silence. Learn to use those.
The other, just to build on your point with the periods of silence, it just feels like people are not comfortable with pauses and silence, right? So how do you get comfortable with that? Is that through practice? Is that through ongoing creating new feedback loops with people that you work with, or your friends, or how does that work for you? Like, any tips on that?
I think practice is the key. Notice when you're talking with someone face to face, obviously someone in your home these days who's been there for the last 6 weeks, that there are periods of silence. Notice them. Get a little comfortable with it. And then get on a video chat with a friend that you trust and try it. Simply practice. That's part of the practice. Why are you laughing?
Well, I was thinking about when is too long of a pause? When is a pause too long? Right? And apart from that, also because a lot of the interview process is nonverbal. And so in a sense, it's also theater.
Sure.
Right? And then to build on that some more, it's a lot of it too is signaling. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about, imagine if we had a pregnant pause for more than a few seconds, what would that be like? And then people get antsy.
Yes. And you're right about the theater thing. I think today, the whole idea of actually practicing what you want to say is all the more critical. If you're faced with doing an interview on video, and most employers will tell us they would really rather do it in person, again, for the cues, for the nonverbals, et cetera. And it's not going to happen that way for a while. Video interviewing is what's going to happen. Really get good at it. Get comfortable with it. Learn what it takes to pause for a short time and yet not for too long a time if you want to think about your answer. Learn to look away for a moment and don't be focused on that camera all the time. It's really hard, but if you can get good at it, you're a leg up because there's nothing in the way of a good interview.
So I have one more question. What if you are asked a question and your mind is completely blank? Because that has happened a lot of times, at least for me.
You simply say, I'm drawing a blank. Can we come back to that question in a few minutes? most people will give you the grace to say, oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time. Why not? Yeah. And again, that might take some practice. Instead of stumbling through something totally irrelevant, simply say, I'm drawing a blank. Can we come back to that?
Are there any more last minute questions? We are kind of approaching time, and this did happen over traditional sort of lunch hour, so I'm sure I'm not the only hungry one. But everybody who signed up, participated, if you did not sign up, you can drop your email in the chat real quick. I'll stick around and capture those. If you did sign up through the link, we will send around the presentation and some other notes and resources, and you'll have our contacts and our touch points so you can follow up with us as you'd like. And then we'll kind of get some feedback from you after the session's over, and then we might be actually formulating some other sessions to respond to that feedback and maybe dive deeper on some things, and continuing to kind of throw these together as we understand more of what the economy will look like and employers will be looking at in the next coming weeks with things starting to reopen. So with that, any last minute questions or thoughts?
Yes, I have one in particular about AI. I'm really worried about how artificial intelligence is going to keep a lot of good candidates already out of the process. And on top of that, I think that employers are going to feel almost like they have to be perfect with their companies. There's already a risk with a lower amount of people that will know what they're trying to do, and since people are not going to be able to just go about their usual business in the traditional ways anymore, how can someone? Because I read an article about minorities, women, and people with disabilities are really going to be left out of the AI process when it comes to resumes and interviews and all those kind of things. How can we find other ways to get around these issues that we struggle with?
I can only talk briefly on that. First of all, in Illinois, if AI is used in the interview and selection process, it has to be fully disclosed. So the good news is it can't be a surprise. The other piece of that is it's on employers who will, as I said, be looking for the best fitting candidates, the best employees that fit their culture, to make sure that any system they use, interviewing, personality tests, AI, whatever it is, to make sure that every tool is focused on hiring the best people and not excluding folks because there's some arbitrary barrier. I think the new normal will help us all.
We had a comment in the chat there talking about the state of Illinois DHS vocational rehab program, assisting people with disabilities achieve job goals. So I think there are some resources out there I'm sure that a lot of folks are familiar with, but I think doing that extra step of research and making sure that there are ways that individuals with disabilities or other considerations can advocate for themselves and others, right, and help and hold those employers accountable and know their rights, I think is an important piece of that. Prepare, right? So I think that step for prepare is one that looking forward to how you can advocate for yourself and hold people accountable. And I think the challenge of kind of AI and auto sorting resumes and having a piece of software, right, that makes sure all the formatting is correct. And if there's one keyword that doesn't match up with kind of the keywords for the job posting, having that sorted out of the system is going to be an ongoing challenge for everybody. But I think there are ways that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raylana, or if this is inappropriate, but ways that I've even used traditionally, right, is leveraging my personal networks and the people I know to identify people who might work at that company and find out if if I can get a direct contact of an HR person and just send them an email or a phone call, right? And follow up on my application and say, hey, I applied, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything, but I just wanted to reach out and say, I appreciate the consideration, or just send a direct contact outside of any automated system that might exist, because that might trigger them to go back in and actually physically pull it out of the system. So I don't know if that's an advisable strategy, but that's one that I've used, maybe just because you have to be more persistent with working around some of these systems that we built.
Absolutely appropriate, Brent. Anything that we can do, as you said, to advocate for ourselves, using appropriate channels and being, again, the positive that we want to be. Being a courteous follow-up, not a nag, if you will, but really doing that. The other thing is employers, again, looking at both sides of this, employers are hearing today more than ever that best practice is to keep in touch with candidates, particularly the good ones, however that's determined, every 5 days. Even if the process is going to take longer than that, every 5 days, reach out to those good candidates. So that's kind of a nice measure to say, okay, I haven't heard from company X for 6 or 7 days. Time to nudge, time to say, hey, just wanted to make sure you got that. And if you had any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining today. Again, we will send out information, the presentation. We can even include a recording of this, so you'll have that for your records as well. And then you'll receive our contact information in the follow-up email. So if there's any other questions or anything, you can reach out, and we can continue to work with you individually and share resources. But we're in this together, and this is the beginning of a kind of a slow recovery out of this. But I think we're here to help however we can. So thank you all again, and I'll stick around, and Andrew, you can stick around too, and Raylana, for a couple more minutes, but otherwise you are free to go and enjoy the rest of your day. It's sunny outside, so hopefully you can get outside safely today. Thanks, everybody.